Let's get started. I'll get started by, I will be running these codes one by one. I would encourage all of you to follow me by running them on your own. And let's go through the outputs as soon as they come. The outputs won't take much time in appearing. And the code is designed in such a way that you will spend more time looking at the output and analyzing the output rather than spending time during coding. And I'm pretty sure that after this session, if you want to use this code for any other project related to classification problem or even regression problem, you will be easily able to integrate any other problem into this framework. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and import the basic libraries. And I'll also go ahead and import the data. Good. So we've got about 38 odd features with 20,000 observations, which is fine because that is how that is what we were told. The 20,000 customers were targeted. Now, if you take a quick check, you will see that, some of them, this is the customer ID, of course. Some of them are numbers. Some of them are categorical, like age bucket is a categorical, occupation is a categorical. Then a bunch of them are numbers. FLG is, these are indicators. So I can see that there are largely three types of variables. From the head output, I can, eyeball and see that there are three kinds of features, right? Numbers, categories, and indicators. Now, indicators are also numbers. So when I do a D types, just to make sure, I will not get any specific category for indicators. So if you go to FLG kind of variables, you will see that they appear as numbers. So I will have to keep that in mind when I split the data into numerical and categorical. Okay, so let's now set some display options, display maximum column so that nothing gets truncated, and suppress the warnings. Okay. Now, as a sanity check, I'm interested to see if there are customer IDs that are missing. Why am I doing this? Because the model ultimately is going to get built at a customer ID level, meaning that it is going to deliver a probability value for every single customer which is identified using a customer ID. Now, if a customer ID is missing, then how will the user of the model link a certain probability, right? If you feed in a independent feature vector into the model, it will give you a probability, right? But if you do not have an ID, then you cannot link it back, right? So you don't know which kind of which customer the probability value is for, and you cannot take any action. So I'm just going to go ahead and check that. The way to do that would be to first, refer to the particular column in the data frame, which is customer ID, and I'm taking is null. So if there are any null values, it will be, a Boolean, true or false will come. So it will be a Boolean. Once I sum it up, I will be able to see how many of them have true, like, how many of these rows have a true condition. So when I run this, I see that, there are no rows where missing is customer ID is missing. So there's nothing that we have to, no row no row needs to be dropped because of missing customer IDs. However, customer ID as a variable is nothing but an identifier of the row, right? Because the data is at a customer level, so every row will have a ID. Now, uh, can anybody tell me why ID needs to be dropped from the data set right away?
I think there is more null value.
Yeah, the ID variable, not the null value. Drop the ID feature from the data set. This is the step that I'm talking about, this one. Why am I dropping the customer ID
So
feature?
it's probably
We will not be using
because it will not help in
numeric feature.
Yeah, both of you are right. But any reason why will it not be helpful? Whatever comes to your mind.
ID is just an unique value for
Asset
that particular user.
of customer.
Okay, someone said ID is a unique value, and there was one more answer
It
coming.
is not affecting the target value also.
Okay, some customers are responding, some customers are not responding. Then what if ID variable? I mean, if customer with a particular kind of ID responds, particular kind of ID doesn't respond, then that is a good way to predict, right? Then what is the issue with ID then? It may affect. We haven't checked. So it is possible that everybody who has responded, in a personal loan, they have the number 2 in the third digit of the ID. Who knows? There can be a pattern, but then we still have to drop the customer ID variable. Okay, customer IDs is, as someone rightly said in the group, this is a unique identifier, right? Now, a unique identifier is not created based on any kind of behavioral characteristics. They are generally created by using of random number algorithms, unique random number algorithms, and then uh, these numbers, once they are assigned, they are maintained throughout the lifetime of the customer, so that whatever the customer does can be linked back to the original customer. Actually, whatever activity, today the particular customer has a savings bank account, tomorrow the person buys a credit card, so it can be linked to that individual, right? Now the funny thing is that these IDs will never ever be created based on any behavioral attributes, behavioral feature. For example, you cannot have an ID which is created specifically for risky customers, like, very very low CIBIL scores, very high CIBIL scores. So those kind of things you're not supposed to have. So that's why ID it cannot be used for any kind of machine learning problem. Number one, because technically, from an operations perspective, also it doesn't make sense, because you're supposed to use the ID just as an identifier, not as a determiner. So the banks cannot use the ID as a determiner for any kind of actions. So all of you have given the right answers, but maybe this is another way of articulating it, where you could say that, look, the ID is an identifier. It is never going to be a determiner because it is not dependent on any behavior, and any kind of lending decision must be influenced by a customer behavior rather than anything else. So you cannot deny a loan if a customer walks into a branch wearing a pink shirt and a bottle green trouser and a sky blue or maybe dark blue sneakers. Very colorful looking customer walking in. No, I don't want that. You just cannot take such random decisions, right? You need to make sure that any kind of because using ID would actually be seen as a very whimsical approach on the part of the bank. So that's why you don't want to retain any ID. Every variable that you drop from your data set, you must have a reason for it. People sometimes don't follow so much of rigor during interviews, but trust me, sooner or later you will come across people who will either ask you during your interview or during your project presentations that, okay, give me a thorough download of all the features that you've dropped and why, like, how many features got dropped at different stages. So ID will come right on the top. The ID got dropped right in the beginning. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Makes sense, everyone?
Yes.
Sorry for the long answer, but I do want to make use of the project session to also make you aware of wherever you might encounter questions. Okay, the next thing for us to do is cleanly split the entire data frame into two parts. First part is going to contain only the target variable, because I am not going to do any kind of data operations on the target variable, right? I will just use the target variable for judgmental purposes of various features, and later on use the target variable for developing of a model. So I should be ideally left with all the features in the X data in order to work with it subsequently. So what I'll do is I will drop the target from the DF data frame to create a data frame called X. And I will keep only the target feature from the DF data frame to create a data frame called Y. And that's how X and Y will get created. Very simple. Is everybody okay so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Now let's get a sense of control over the project. The first thing you should do is you should always check how much of event rate you're dealing with, because 12.56% is the event rate. Now, what is the interpretation of 12.56%? You see, the interpretation is this, that today, right, there is no model. The bank has not used any kind of model. The bank has probably used business judgmental sense and certain, business common sense, for the lack of a better term, right? And gone ahead and, carried out the entire targeting process. But then 12.56% is the extent to which the bank has been successful. So every 100 offers that were given out, 12 and a half, near about 13 offers came out as positive. 13 responses were received for every 100 offers that were made. That is the story as of now. Now, what is your motivation to build a machine learning model? Not only to be able to automatically, assign a certain cutoff and, kind of get to the, what do you call it? Get to the ones who will respond in a very automated manner. That's not the only objective. The other objective, which we must understand, is our objective is to improve our chances of success. So 12.5% is the threshold. We are going to look for zones, segments, groups, clusters, whatever adjective we want to use from English language, but we are ultimately going to look for those collection of customers within which chance of success is much, much higher than 12.56%. This I want to make sure that all of you understand before we proceed. The reason why I'm checking to the event rate is because I want to make sure that I'm aware of what is the average event rate in absence of the model. So in absence of the model, 12.5% is what my success is going to look like. When the model comes into play, I want to be able to identify different groups of customers where the success rate is much higher than 12.5%. Is that clear to everyone, or any questions you have? Okay.
Hello. So you are asking about success means acquiring the customers.
Success means responding positively, target equal to 1.
Okay. Nice.
Okay.
So how does mean give you the response rate?
It is.
It is giving the mean of your the target variable, right?
That is the response rate.
Okay, so 12% data is there, so it means that is.
Hang on. So check this out. Out of 20,000, 2512 have responded, right?
Okay. Got it.
Got it?
0.1. Yes,
So
yes.
yeah, so all of you must be comfortable with the concept of, see, when you have a target variable, when you apply the mean on the target variable, understand this very clearly. The mean on the target variable, which is 10, actually stands for the actual probability or actual event rate. When I say event, an event is nothing but a positive outcome or a success. Okay. In case of a cross-sell targeting model, anybody who has responded has contributed to an event or a positive response. Clear, everybody?
Right. Got it.
Got it. So when we apply mean, we ultimately get 12.56, whatever it be the number. But keep this number in mind, because we must find groups where, if you go after the 20,000 people just the way you did last time around, then you will be again getting a 12.56%, success rate, right? Now what you want to do is you want your model to identify people for you identify groups for you so that within those groups, the chance of success or the event rate is actually much, much higher. Are all of you able to follow me?
Right. Yes.
Hmm? Now, the motivation for you to build a machine learning model is going to be to deliver that strategic advantage. And this is how I would like all of you to articulate during an interview. That why would I want you to build a model in the first place? Am I looking only to automate my decision of who to target, who not to target? That is not it. I want you to deliver strategic advantage and tell me that, Aurithro, don't target everybody. Target only the people that are being identified by the model. Target only these many people. Then I will ask you, okay, what's the percentage of success in those groups? You should be able to tell me that, look, I want you to target only these kind of people because the chance of success is much higher. That is a strategic advantage for that a machine learning model actually delivers in case of marketing analytics. All right. So with that, let's proceed. I will use select D types function from pandas to split the X variable into two parts. One data frame will be called NUM. The second data frame will be called CHAR. In the NUM, I'll be including objects which are number or numerical ones. And in CHAR, I'll be including the ones which are categorical. So I'll just go ahead and create this. Now, if you remember over here, we saw that the flag features, which are indicators, are also expressed as numbers. So within NUM, I will be having some of these flag features, right? So what I do is I create a data frame. I would be dropping the indicator features from NUM to build a separate data frame. I create a data frame by just the indicator features from NUM data frame. And then finally, within NUM, I drop the indicators so that it's very clean. Now my NUM is not going to have those indicators. Those indicators will be a part of IND data frame and the characters will be a part of CHAR data frame. So go ahead and run this. You will see that IND is composed of 4 features. Makes sense. And NUM is composed of 28 features, which makes sense. Okay. So did all of you reach this part till this point?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's talk about outliers and whatever it is, now, what is an outlier? An outlier is something which is far removed from majority of the data, right? Now our textbooks teaches us that if you have a value which is beyond 75% of the data, meaning, beyond the 25th percentile, anything lower than that, or anything higher than 75th percentile should be called an outlier. But in the real life situations, we don't do that. We want to retain majority of the data and we set a cutoff of 99%. So if there are values that are, outside of the 99% range of the data, then we call them as outliers. So when you run this describe function with these percentile cutoffs, you will end up getting a output like this. Now let me explain to you what we mean by outliers here. So if you take this feature age, okay, let's take balance, right? So 1% is 1.677. I think it's 167,000, 16,776, right? Now, this will represent 1 percentile value, meaning that 99% people are above this number. Now, if you see the 99% number, it means that 99% people are lower than or equal to 3.4127, whatever is the number, right? So that's how you interpret between 1% and 99%. So outliers are values that lie outside this range. So between 1% and minimum, you will have the lower end outliers. Between 99% and max, you will have the upper end outliers. Okay. Now, once we do that, once we kind of get this describe output for all the features. Instead of, I mean, you can try and see where you have. So for example, in case of age, in the bottom end, there are no outliers. In the top end also, there are no outliers. But in case of balance, there are some outliers. But what about the other ones? So what are these? Total number of transactions, right? Here again, in the minimum side, I guess, there are no outliers here. Yep. But in case of maximum, there are some outliers here. So between 31 and 74, it's quite a jump. What is this variable? Average amount per ATM transaction. Majority of the data, majority of customers, they don't even have any ATM transaction going on. But yeah, the outliers are very, very small here. So you can't do this manually. I mean, that's why I wrote a small function out here to cap and floor. What this will do is this function makes use of the clip function from pandas. And when you say clip, you can pass arguments which are basically lower and upper. So if you clip lower, it will not let the feature value go below that threshold. When you clip upper, the clip function will not let the feature value go above that particular threshold. Now, how do I define the threshold? In this function, I'm calling the quantile function again. So basically, this is a user-defined function. Within this function, I'm calling the clip function first, passing the argument lower, and within lower, I am defining the threshold with help of quantile function, that x dot quantile 0.01. That's the first percentile threshold, and then clip upper at the 99 percentile threshold. So once I run this, and then when I apply this, when I make all the features go through this function, what it will do is any number, any value below 1% will get floored at that particular 1% value. Any number which is higher than 99% will get floored at, will get capped at 99% value. So it will happen through a lambda function, avoiding any loops here. Now, if you run the describe function, you will see that you now don't have any issues with, so between 1% and minimum, the numbers are matching. Between 99% and maximum, numbers are matching. So you don't, your data no longer has the problem of outliers vis-a-vis 99% of the data. So I'll take a quick pause here to see if you guys have any questions.
No questions from my side about this part.
No questions, okay. Okay, all right. Missing value analysis. Moving on to the next part, missing value analysis. So again, I'm using mean. If I don't use mean, I will get number of rows in which there are missing values for each of these features. But I'm interested to see the percentage of rows for which the values are missing. So how many rows are there? 20,000 rows. So across 20,000 rows, what is the percentage of missing value for every feature? So that is what I'm interested to see. I can see that none of the features have any missing value. Data doesn't contain any missing value. So imputation processes are not required. If you guys are interested, then I can share with you some of the missing value technique, missing value imputation code, because we are not using that here though. Yeah, but that is for later. I mean, we're just going to use a simple imputer class over there, so it should be okay. Okay, so missing value, of course, is not there. And let's move to feature selection. Okay, shall we begin this feature selection stage? All of you are at this stage, or
Yes.
any of you lagging behind? Anybody facing any challenges in running the codes? Do you usually have Python classes in this manner, or this is fine?
No, we have not had like any hands-on like this, but we usually go through the code and then do it ourselves. But this works as well because since you shared it already, we are already aware of the share code. And now, if once you're going through it, people who have gone through might know like what they were having some difficulties, and now
Yeah. See,
able to.
my effort, guys, is that I don't want you guys to come back to this video anymore. No point. Okay. In this class itself, try and make sure that you run everything along with me, so that if you get stuck anywhere, you call that out immediately. Do not hesitate. And if you don't get the chance to call it out in the class, use your WhatsApp, call me later on also, no problem. But I just want to make sure that everybody's time gets optimally used. So, okay, without any further ado, let's move to something called variance threshold. Variance threshold is a particular class in sklearn. Let me quickly go to sklearn. This is a feature selection tool. It will remove all the features which are having zero variance. Okay. So first thing you should do when you select features from the numerical data frame, part one is remove features with zero variance. How do we go about doing that? From sklearn, we go to the feature selection module, and from that module, we import the class called variance threshold. Now, once we import this class, I'm creating an object called varSelector, and that object is defined by the parameter of threshold equal to 0. Okay, so threshold that I'm keeping is 0. I mean, that is the default anyway. Now, once you have this object, you can apply a certain method to it. And I'm applying the fit transform method on the NUM data frame. Okay, now when you apply the fit transform method, we could essentially, as a next step, get the indices of columns to keep. So we are, how do we get those indices? We get those indices through get support. So in varSelector, so if you apply the get support method, you will basically end up getting a list of all the indices, which are, you can keep those indices, in some particular, give it a name for that list. I mean, you can, I'm calling this as, COLS. That's the name of the list that I've given, COLS. Once you have these indices in a certain list, you can use iloc in order to select those particular columns. Okay. Now, the funny thing is that this data set has all features which are zero, more than zero, variance. So it will not drop anything for you. But in order to make sure that, any other project, if you go and do this, say you had 3,000, 4,000 features, it was not possible. It will not be possible for you to manually figure out which feature is having zero variance and then manually removing it from the data, right? It's better to do it this way, where you can use iloc and you will select all the columns and only select past that list of indices, column indices, which are above the zero threshold actually. Okay, so the method should not be a problem for all of you. But what might
So
be
Aditya,
a...
can you
Mhm.
could you just please repeat this feature selection part? Because like, is it like we are specifying like, only keep columns which will have like variance up to a certain threshold, and like,
Yeah,
something of that
threshold
sort,
we will
like
do.
something like
We are interested to, I was going to ask you this question, that see, the whole point of this particular snippet is that we want to keep those features in our data which have a non-zero positive variance. Okay, greater than zero variance, that's
okay,
all I want to say.
okay.
Now I have a question for all of you. Here's the question: why do I need to do this?
Those features with zero variance may not be having an impact on that target variable.
Yes, right.
But why will it not have an impact?
when we get the data, we do not know, right?
No. You know this. Why will a feature having zero variance not be predictive?
Because it won't vary.
Mhm.
Because it won't vary.
Because it will not vary. It will not vary. It does not matter. It doesn't matter whatever whatever value whichever customer takes, because using that feature you cannot distinguish between customer A and customer B, because both the customers are going to have the same value for that feature. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right? So yeah, so that is why if they have the same value, it will not have any impact. The other answer you should give is that in a regression problem, this is a classification problem, of course you cannot, I mean, his answer is absolutely right, but if this was a regression problem, then also you need to remove the ones with zero variance. Think of a linear regression problem. What will be your answer in a linear continuous variable? If you have a continuous variable to predict, you must remove features which are zero variance. Why? Same thing. I mean, it will not, I mean, it will take the same value, but one other way to answer this is that if a variable does not have any variance within itself, right, it cannot explain the variance in the dependent variable. Therefore, the R square will be meaningless if you keep a feature like this. If a feature does not have a variance within itself, how can it explain the variance in the dependent variable? That's the other answer to this question. So I'm really sorry if I'm taking time to go through these points, guys, but I want to make sure that we take pauses wherever we can to evaluate what kind of questions we might encounter. The whole point is that getting you guys ready in such a manner that this is not just going to be one project. I mean, there can be any other, you're free to like practice a number of other projects, but how to guide you in terms of questions, interventions, interjections, and that can come, like, uncomfortable points. So I hope it's okay. If it is too slow as a pace, then let me know.
No, it's
No, it's
helpful.
It's actually helpful.
Okay, cool. So now, okay, let's just scroll up a little bit and go to this output, NUM shape. How many did you have? 28 columns, correct?
Right.
And after removing variance, how many do you have now?
26.
26.
So you have dropped 2. So you can
Right.
see how your story is building. You first dropped your ID, then you split numerical character, whatever. Then you took away your indicators. So you now have 28 numericals. Out of 28 numericals, you now have 26 numericals. Why? Because 2 of them have zero variance. It's a very straightforward, simple, clean story that is getting built, right? Now the next part of feature selection must be discussed. And this is highly interesting because this is actually a very manual process. Some of you will definitely hate me for teaching you this, but trust me, when you want to sell your model, there is no better way than doing this. And I'm really thankful to whoever has wrote, K-Bins discretizer class in sklearn. Let's quickly show you that. In sklearn, go and check K-Bins discretizer. And you can see how it works. Okay. Number of bins you can mention, encoding 1 heart, etc. So it takes away, I think, weeks of hard work in terms of coding just by doing this. Because ultimately, whether you do it the hard way or whether you're using the K-bins, what matters is how you interpret the output. So let me show you what you need to do here. First, I'll tell you what you're looking to do. What you're looking to do is you're looking to see if the value of the feature changes from a lower value to a higher value. Say any feature you take, say for example age, right? You go from a lower age value to a higher age value. What kind of impact you have on the event rate? So if you take a collection of people who are low age group, do they have a higher response rate than people who are middle age group or say advanced age group? So if that is the case, if the event rate is changing with change in the X value or change in the value of the feature, then we can say that that particular feature is actually predictive. And this directly follows from the earlier conversation that we had here, that if a feature have zero variance, it will definitely not be predictive, right? So you must have some change of values. Now we are logically moving to the next step where we say that, okay, let me explore that as those values changes, what kind of impact does it actually have on the event rate? Now, okay, so far so good?
Yes.
So far so good, okay. Now, let's just try to follow me. Now, if I want to do this job, right, and I have, let's say 200 features, 5,000 features, and I need some direction, right? I cannot just do it haphazardly. So what I want to do is, I want to create, like go back to your school days, like you have a certain number of students in a class and you divide them into 10 groups. First group is composed of top 10 people who scored top 10 marks in physics. Second group is composed of next 10 people according to the marks in physics and so on. Okay, so if it is the subject of physics that we're discussing. So these groups, these 10 groups are going to get created in such a way that the first group is going to be composed of certain kind of value, second group certain kind of value, and then distinct different values will be there in distinct groups. We bring that concept here using k-bins. So I will say that let's keep n bins equal to 10, encode equal to ordinal, strategy, quantile, meaning that I want 10 groups, okay, 10 groups, and I will be looking for an encoding of those groups 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10, and they need to be ordinal, meaning that group 1 and group 2. So group 2 should have higher value than group 1. Group 3 should have actually higher value than group 2, and so on. And strategy is going to be quantile. So when I say 10 bins using quantile strategy, therefore every bin should have 10% observations. Make sense?
Yes.
Take a minute to think about it. When I mentioned I need 10 bins, right? How am I going to create those bins? I'm going to create them based on quantiles. 10 bins will exhaust 100% of the population. One bin will account for 10% of the population, correct?
Right.
Right? Makes sense, everyone? Okay, cool. Now, the method called fit transform, when you apply it, by default gives you a array. Now, what I'm trying to do here is I'm creating a data frame called NUM bind, and directly I'm taking this array and converting that into a data frame where I'm giving the index as NUM underscore 1 index. NUM underscore 1 is created in the earlier step where I removed a couple of variables because of zero variance. And I want to retain the same column names. Okay, the same columns actually. Now, these particular features are going to take values from 1 to 10. These are ranks, nothing but ranks. Rank 1, rank 2, up to rank 10, right? 10 ranks, everybody, I mean, 20,000 people, rank 1 accounts for top 10 or bottom 10%, and rank 10 accounts for top 10%, right? So I'm adding a suffix called rank so that I don't get confused as a user, right? That which variable am I referring to? So when I look at age, I actually want to see these values, the one on top, 27, 47, 40, 53, and so on. So if I'm dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, I want to call it age underscore rank. So an automated way of doing that is just by calling the add suffix function. You can actually call add prefix also, up to you. I like to call the suffix function and I give the suffix underscore rank. So let's go ahead and run this. Wonderful. So all the features, 26 features, have been ranked and they are called rank now. Okay. Did all of you get this output?
Actually, I have one question. Why it's not in order?
Not in order. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be in order. How can it be in order?
No, you said you encode as ordinal.
No, ordinal and order are different. Nominal data and ordinal data, it will take me in a different tangent. I want you to please Google that term. Okay. Ordinal data and nominal data that you have to see. 175, etc. So you need, so there is difference between the values in 7th group and first group.
Okay, got it.
So if you see the values are increasing, that is why it is. So if a particular, what do you call it? The ranking is from 0 to 9 actually. So somebody getting a, encoding of 0 meaning the lowest value, encoding of 1 meaning highest value. So ordinal data meaning that the data is in order, but what you are expecting is that the data will be sorted.
Yeah.
That is not the right.
Now I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, what am I going to do is I want to take this particular feature, right? And across these groups in a cross tabulation manner using visualization, I want to see how does my actual event rate vary across these groups. I'll repeat that. I'm interested to see how does my event rate vary across these groups, because if you see age rank equal to 1, it will be composed of 2000 customers, right? Because 20,000 is my total number of customers in the data. So every rank value will capture 2000 customers, isn't it?
Yes.
So I am going to see how does the event rate change. Now, check if the features show any slope at all. If they do, then do you see some deciles below the population average and some higher than the population average? What is the population average? Population average 12.5%, right? So if that is the case, then the slope will be strong, and a strong slope is indicative of features is ability to discriminate the event from a non-event, making it a good predictor. Okay, so there will be no argument on this. So how do we actually do this? First thing to do is getting the Y variable concatenated to the NUM bin data, because I will ultimately take one feature and I will compare it with Y, right? So I will have to bring in, because it doesn't have the target variable. So I'll bring in the target variable as a first step. Second thing to do is I will loop through all the columns one by one, and keeping Y as a constant feature target, I will iterate over the call variable as X in the X axis, keeping the data as X bin combined, and I will plot the event rate, which is going to be the basic, the likelihood of response, actually, the average likelihood of response. So let me run this. It will take a minute or two to get through all the variables. Please run this along with me. No questions so far? I hope you guys are enjoying the hands-on project session. Normally it doesn't happen this way, but I just thought that this is a more engaging way of dealing with the issue of project. So if there's any challenges you're facing, please let me know. Yeah, don't hesitate.
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. We have the charts. Did all of you get the charts?
Yes.
Awesome. So just try to see which variables do not show any slope. You can see this one, right? Age. See, what is the average event rate? 12.5%. Can you see this 12.5% mark?
Right.
Not many age groups are beating that average. So there are some people, a group of this is one group, second group, three groups. Three groups will be 6,000 customers, because every group is 2,000 customers. There's only a small group where you have some indication that it is higher than normal as an as a feature, response feature. But yeah, the likelihood of response actually doesn't go much above 12.5%. So that doesn't look like a great predictor. Let's move to the next one, balance. See, balance is a very good predictor because there's a steady declining trend across all these groups. So if you see this one, right, this is the highest customers with the highest balance group. People who have a lot of money, they don't need loans.
Yes.
Which is what you You can see right over here, right? So they don't need a lot of rules. So that's the story. Okay. You kind of, you're able
Yes.
to figure it out, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now comes SCR. SCR, you can see how the discrimination goes. See, the point is this. When you get these graphs, right, all you do is take out your snipping tool, copy this and put it in a PPT or somewhere, and your story is getting built. That this is what I observed. This is the evidence right in front of you, that why did I choose SCR as a part of my modeling feature. So that is why we're doing this. Yeah, I like this variable. This is a very good, nice discriminator. This one is a good discriminator. This one, not so much. Length of retention. So what I do is, I would like to create a list of features which I don't find to be that good. So I've gone ahead and I've created a list of features, and I've given a lot of benefit of doubt. See, this is where you guys will end up being subjective. So one of you might choose, might like a feature. Some of you may, you may decide that, okay, this particular feature is good. Some other person might say that, okay, this particular feature is not good. So there will be some subjectivity in this output. But yeah, I have created a list of features here directly, you can see. And these are the ones which are not working out that well. So I will not go through each of these graphs, but I gave you a gist of what to look for. Okay. And I leave it up to you. You can modify this list and see if you can improve on the outcome of the model.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please explain, just by taking the feature age, that what exactly we are trying to interpret from this?
I have written some notes over here to explain that as well. What we are trying to interpret is this, that, remember I explained to you that your model is supposed to give you strategic advantage over your population average rate, right?
Yes.
Most age groups are below 12.5%. There are only very small few age groups which are above 12.5%, but again, that is a reversing trend. So if you take this feature, this is not a good feature, because you don't have any strong sense of discrimination. If you compare age, say for example, if you compare age and balance, you can clearly see that people with higher balance will have a lower likelihood of response. People with lower balance will have a, lowest of balances, lowest 20% balances will have very high likelihood of response. So you can see the discrimination, the distinction between this group and this group is very, very stark, right?
Yes.
But if you see, do you see a lot of discrimination between this group and this group? No, right?
Yes, right.
That's why we're removing age. Okay. And then keep looking for such, for this one, marketing scores, 7, 8, 9, these guys are like 15%, much higher than 12.5. Now compared to 15%, this one is like 7.5. So nearly half the time, half the chance of success will be if you take the score from the bottom groups. So between the higher score groups and the lower score groups, the discrimination is very, very distinct, which is why this is a good feature. So using this argument and using this methodology, I was able to spot some things, some features which kind of don't work, did not make sense. So I made a list of them. Okay. So I made a list of them here. For now, you can just run it with me, but later on, what you can do is, you don't have to come back to this video anymore, but you can, play around with this data and try to enhance this list, or maybe shorten this list to see if you can include more features in your model. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'll just...
One question.
Yeah, tell me.
So here, whatever we discussed in this method, so we are basically trying to find out the correlation between different independent variables and the target variable, right?
No, not correlation. We are trying to find out some causation.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? You're actually right. It will go both way, correlation and causation. So we're looking for linear discrimination actually. See, the problem with correlation, guys, is that, okay, can anybody define correlation for me?
It's
Quickly.
basically, it tells us the relationship between the target variable and the independent features. So whether is it going to be positive, negative, or no relationship.
Okay. What kind of relationship does it show you?
Here, in some of the cases, we see positive. Like for example, if you
No,
take
no, no,
this,
no, 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 no. I'm sorry to interrupt you. In your definition of correlation, you missed out the most important word. Can anybody tell me which word got missed? There is a good reason why I'm.
Direction instead.
No, that is not the word I'm looking for. There's a very good reason why I'm asking.
it's basically the strength of the relationship. You mean?
Not that word. Still that word. I'm not getting that word from anybody. No. Okay. See, 99.999% of the definition is correct. The only one word is missing, and never miss this word again. Correlation is the strength of linear relationship only. Linear. It will not be the strength of curvilinear relationships, strength of polynomial relationship. No. Correlation is the extent to which there exists a linear relationship between X and Y. The moment you miss the word linear, the definition itself is not correct. I mean, where I'm coming from is, I made that mistake, guys. I will never forget this. I made this mistake in my Viva during statistics in my, yeah, I'm quite ashamed of it. But because I made that mistake, I always point it out to people that please don't make this mistake yourself. Correlation is always about linear relationship. It is no, it doesn't tell you any other relationship. But for example, check this out. This one will have a low correlation. Why? Because the relationship is not that linear. This one will have a higher correlation because the relationship is actually quite linear. So in a way, you're right. You're not wrong by saying that we're looking for correlations, but we're also, but I wouldn't use the word correlations. I would just use the word discrimination. I'm looking for features that discriminate between customers with regards to the event rate or the chance of responding to an offer. That's what we're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. But please, guys, remember that you have to use the word linear. I lost out a mark or two during my Viva myself. So I make it a point to please let me inform people. All right, cool. So, and yeah, so I'm just going ahead and removing these features because they don't seem that predictive to me. And I went ahead and I did that. Once I did it, I am left with 19 features. Now, this is something I'm left with. In part 3, I want to now see that, okay, based on visualizations and based on subjectivity, I've done this. Can I reduce it further by keeping, I just remove 2 features from here, keep 17 odd features, but I also want these features to go through a round of scrutiny through the select k-best method. It is similar to the variance threshold method. You apply the fit transform on this, and what you will end up getting is you will end up getting those column indices through get support. The column indices are those columns which you need to keep in your data. So if I run this part and I basically create a data frame called select features df num, that selected features from the data frame num is nothing but num_1.ilog, all the rows and these columns only, right? So let's see which are those columns. So finally, these are the features that are getting selected, 17 odd features from my data frame, numerical data frame. Okay, so
out of 1917, right, Aritra?
Out of 1917. You can keep 19 also, but let's keep at least remove like at least 2, depending on
How we decide?
Chi-square, right? Chi-square method.
Yeah, it is testing for chi-square goodness of fit.
How we decide 17 only?
No, it is subjective. There's no definition for that. It's subjective. I can keep 19 also, but if I have to reduce my universe from 19 to something, I just give a bare minimum number to reduce, which is from 19 to 17. If you have thousands of features, you can remove, say, 50 features or 100 features. You want to keep only the best ones. So I wanted to keep the best 17 out of 19 so that I don't lose out. I don't lose out on too many features, but I also want to keep the best of the best. Make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. So numerical features are done. Now let's move to categorical: gender, occupation, age, bucket, account type. we are not going to use any variance selection stuff. We'll directly create these plots. These are created in my screen. So let's see. Okay, gender is 20%. 20%, okay. But ideally speaking, gender shouldn't be a discriminator for any loans. You should not discriminate customers based on gender because of fair lending principles. Self-employed people are applying for more loans and they are responding more to these offers. Salaried individuals are not that interested to get a loan. Okay, all right. Age bucket. Age bucket, again, this is following the same pattern. We are not getting to see much discrimination between 41 to 45 is this group where you have some responses coming from this group more than 12.5%, but largely across different age groups, you will have response rate in the neighborhood of 12.5%, which doesn't give me any additional strategic advantage. I mean, I would rather build a model without using these features, right? Without using the age group. Account type, current account, definitely much higher. So everything else is okay. I mean, there is some discrimination between current and this account. There's some discrimination. Okay, so let's move to this one. This one, of course, there's discrimination. Gender also, there is discrimination. Although we shouldn't use the gender variable, but yeah, for academic purposes right now, let's remove age bucket, just age bucket and keep the rest of them. So when I remove age bucket, I am left with the others. Okay, and here I am now going to create encoded versions of these 100 encoded versions of the character variables by the get dummies function. And I will say drop first equal to true. Drop first equal to true is very important because if you don't use this, you will fall into the dummy variable trap, which is going to be that, you know, if you have 4 levels and you create 4 dummies, then the problem is that the 4th level is 100% correlated version with the other levels, because when you have 3 levels already, when 3 conditions are not satisfied, it automatically means it will go to the 4th condition. So the 4th variable does not need to get created explicitly. So we say drop first equal to true so that we create n-1 dummies features with create dummy features with n-1 levels. So we now have, once we do this, xchar dum is composed of 20,000 rows and 6 features. Now, out of these 6 features, let's keep the top 5 by again deploying select k-best. Once we run this, we can see that this is the story. Gender, other, good. Occupation, salary, self-employed, SENP. These are getting kept in the data. Account type SA, which is savings account. So what it has done is basically kept the ones which are lower than so gender equal to O, then all the ones which are, because if I did a drop first equal to true, right? So M couldn't get created. So between F and O got selected, right? Now self-employed could not get created. Between salary, professional and SENP, I think professional and SENP got selected. Sorry, salary, self-employed and SENP, all 3 got selected. All 3 got selected. Then comes account type, current account and savings account. So we are selecting only the savings account here using the k-best output. Okay, now we have selected features from the character variables also, in addition to the numerical ones. The only thing we haven't done so far is deal with the indicator variables, which we are going to do right away. So this one's good. This one is not so good. This one is not so good. So has old loan, has nominee, not good, no slope, no discrimination, very less discrimination. Has any charges, good discrimination. Some, I mean, not very good, but yes. This one is actually quite good, has credit card or does not have credit card. So this is an ideal discrimination, guys. One group should be above the 12.5% mark. One group should be below the 12.5% mark. This is an example of a very good discrimination. Does it make sense? Now let's get the features into IND and finally create the master featured set for model development. So I'm concatenating everything together, right? Creating something called XOL. Once I do this, all my selected features are in one group, right? And I can now just, just to check it myself, the 2.1, 2.5K observations are there. So 12.5%. Now comes train test split. Train test split, let's perform this. When you run the next snippet, you will get access to the size of the training data and the basically the testing data as well. Now, if you look at the training data, the event rate is 12.7%. In the testing data is 12.1%. So I mean, it's in the neighborhood, in the ballpark, but in the ideally speaking, it should be somewhat similar. I mean, yeah, it's not that dissimilar. So we can live with this difference. But let's make sure that, I mean, we've seen the target variable. How about the, how about the independent features? Let's actually check that. So in training, if I do a describe and I do a describe on the testing, say occupation salary, okay, what is the mean? 2.29, 0.29, 0.45 is the standard deviation, 0.45. Let's see the score. Average score 442, average score 434, standard deviation 249, standard deviation 249, minimum value 106, minimum value 106. So you can see between training and testing, the process of selection which of rows between to define the training data and the testing data is very random. So the fact about random data sets is that the distribution of features in random data sets, they have to be same. So that's what we are checking here. We are being very, very thorough with our work here. So we want to make sure that all the features are stable and they are worthy of building models. Because, if you build a model on an unstable feature, later on the distribution of the feature changes, and that can lead to a lot of issues for decision-making purposes. We don't want that. We want to make sure that, our features that go into the model are actually quite stable. So which is something we are checking from a completeness and thoroughness perspective. Okay, now we will begin building our model. Anybody, any questions? Sorry. Nope.
No.
Okay. So yeah, all right. Now what we'll do is we'll compare a decision tree, random forest, and GBM. Okay. And in order to do this, I'm importing decision tree classifier, and I'm giving the criteria of Gini, and I'm creating an object. I'm not fitting the model yet. The reason being, I want to do a grid search. I want to do a grid search on minimum sample split and maximum depth in order to see what are some of the, what's the outcome of the grid search and what are the best parameters for building the tree that I want to do. Don't run this snippet now because it will take a lot of time. So ideally speaking, you can just directly refer to this outcome here. It shows that the tree should have a maximum depth of 5 and minimum samples you need for a node to split apart is 140. So I'm going to use this output of the grid search in the tree when I fit the decision tree, right? And I will go ahead and do that. When I move to the next kind of model, which is an ensemble of decision tree using simple random sample with replacement called random forest. And this is based on bootstrap aggregation or bagging. Now over here, so that I can compare the outcome of a random forest with a decision tree, let's keep the maximum depth and the minimum sample split criteria to be same so that the outcomes can be compared. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay. So let's fit the random forest model. With a similar thought process, let us go ahead and fit the boosting model, the gradient boosting model. Are all of you able to run these codes, or any of you facing any issues with errors, getting stuck anywhere? Anything like that taking place?
No, it's fine.
No.
No error.
Okay. I hope you're finding this format of the class to be more engaging than just watching the screen and then having to go through it again. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm assuming. Let me know when all of you are able. When all of you have finished building the 3 models. We can proceed after that.
Done with.
Done. Done. Okay. Right. Cool. Now
We can select max depth equal to 6 also, right? Means it came
you can.
as 6.
No. There is nothing stopping you. You can. The reason why I did it this way is because I first optimized the parameters for a decision tree, and then I want to increase the complexity of the algorithm while keeping the parameters constant. For example, if you think of a decision tree in a random forest is an ensemble of individual decision trees, right? If I'm building a decision tree with max step 5, then giving a max step 6 to a random forest will give it a much more unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to make sure that your parameters are comparable, only then the outcomes can be comparable, because at the end of the day we are trying to see which algorithm is going to give us the best strategic advantage in our decision making with regards to the next phase of the campaign, right? So we must be able to create comparable outputs. Now if you want to create comparable outputs, you must make sure that your parameters they are on the same page. Only then you can kind of, because if you see the code right now, the only difference between the D tree and the RF model is the algorithm. The rest of the parameters are same.
Okay, in my case it is coming max depth 6 in my machine. That's why.
Okay, go ahead and use 6. I would love to see the outcome. Please go ahead and use 6. Do not use 4, 5. May I know your name?
Kajal Ghosh.
Kajal, please. Kajal, definitely go ahead and use 6. Once we go through, I'll request you to share the screen and let's compare. You will have slightly better result actually.
But at the same time, it must be not overfitting, right?
It will not, yeah, it shouldn't actually overfit. Yeah. So that is why max depth 5, I think, is okay from an intuition perspective. I mean, intuitively, if you go more than 4, 5, then there's a lot of possibility of overfitting. But yeah, let's see. I mean, let Kajal use 6, and that's okay. No problem. Okay, now when we try to evaluate this, we can try to sort of, do this for training and testing both. But as of now, I'm basically using the dot predict function on the testing data, and I want to see if the cutoff probability is 50%, then how many observations get classified correctly, and how many events get classified correctly, and how many non-events get classified correctly if the cutoff is 50%. So that's the default cutoff. So on a default level, in the most automated fashion, how does the model behave? Okay, that is the question that we are trying to answer using evaluation. But we've discussed this earlier, that we cannot target only the ones which are predicted to be responding, because then in that case, the portfolio or the business will not grow. The business wants to identify at least a large enough group of people, but also not so large as 20,000, definitely lower, smaller number than 20,000. But within that number, chance of success should be much, much higher. That's the strategic advantage of ML models, and that's what we are looking forward to. However, let's move towards creating the outcomes for all the models. Yeah, both by looking at the accuracy score, precision score, etc., and the confusion metrics. So I will first import metrics, and I will import the confusion metrics as well from the metrics module. So I'm printing accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score for the decision tree. And I've created an object called ypred tree. I'm sorry, a data set called ypred tree. And this is based on the dot predict outcome. Okay, we can see that precision is 59%. Okay, and when you run the confusion matrix, so out of predicted 315, you have 209 to be correctly predicted. So out of a large number of people who are actually, who have responded, only 10% of them, 7.2% of them have been captured by the model. Now, when we say captured by the model, we mean that 7.2% is being captured with a threshold probability of 0.5. We have not yet explored whether if we lower the probability threshold from 0.5, are we going to get a better capture rate or not? So that we haven't checked so far. But at a basic, if with the fundamental cutoff of 50%, the model automatically is able to capture around 8% of all the actual events or responders. And out of whoever the model is trying to predict as potential responders, 60% of them have been genuine responders. So that's the outcome of the tree model. This is the outcome of the random forest model. Even worse, that okay, with 50% chances, I mean, most of the observations are, most of the responders don't even have a 50% probability. Now, like I said, 50% chance of success may not be the best cutoff to apply. So we will have to check for other ways of doing this, other ways of evaluation as well. But in case of GBM, we can see some balanced output. We can see that the recall is 23.97%. This tells me that the GBM model automatically, just by looking at the data, just by looking at the 3 confusion metrics, do you guys get some sense that, okay, even if I don't work or even if I don't work on the cutoff probability, automatically the model that is performing the best is GBM so far?
Yes.
Right. But what kind of recommendation will you drive with to your client that, okay, please go after these 833 people? How will you create some sort of profile or target group? So that's what we will look into next. What happened here? Okay. Yeah. So we are creating this particular analysis called Lorentz curve analysis, and I will explain one of them, and the rest of them is actually the same. The logic here is this, that when we apply the predict underscore probe, right, and you take the second column, right, you end up getting the probability, the predicted probability of response. So why pred prob is the predicted probability of response as per the D-tree model. Clear? This part is clear?
Yes.
Predicted probability of response. Okay. Now, remember the school example teacher, the school example where the teacher says that, okay, based on your whatever prelim marks, and I'm predicting that this is the probability that so much. So somebody has defined success as getting 90% or more. Okay. So the teacher says, okay, he assigns probabilities to each student of getting 90% or more. Some of them get very high probability, some of them get very low or whatnot, right? Now, if you want to evaluate how good your teacher's prediction is, so what you want to do is you want to create a group which is composed of the highest predicted probability of success, right? You take that group and you wait for the actual board results to come. When the board results come out, you see that how many of your, how many people in that group actually end up getting more than 90%. So that is going to be a way to measure the success. Make sense? All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting those predicted probabilities in an array. Next, I'm creating a column in my original data frame with those predicted probabilities. I actually had to bring my baby. I mean, she was crying so loud. Her mom's busy otherwise. You might get some background I apologize for that. She's a bit cranky with everything today. Okay, let me continue. Now, like I said, you what you want to do is you want to create groups of deciles actually based on sorted values of the probabilities, which which you want to do using the quartile cut function. So over here, this row, you can see my highlighted row. This row gives you applying the quartile cut function here on the ypred p column. Okay. And I'm creating 10 groups, method equal to first. So 1 to 10 will be created. Group 1 will have the lowest of probabilities. Group 10 will have 10% highest of probability values. Okay. So that's how these deciles are going to get created. Questions, anyone? Guys, questions? Okay. Now,
Could you once again please repeat? I did not get exactly how it happened. After the predicted probably part.
okay, so you have a column of predicted probabilities, right? Now what you're doing is you are creating 10 groups out of them, just like K-Bin's discretizer. The same thing you're trying to do using quartile cut function, because I'm only dealing with one column. I don't want to bring in the K-Bins. I want to do it using just one step or using quartile cut. So you take one column and you choose the top 10 values, the bottom, the lowest 10 values, you keep them in the first group called decile 1 or group 1. Now, because there are 10 groups that will get created, right? It will be decile. If you have a decile means a DEC, meaning 10 groups. So the lowest one will have the value of 1. The second, the decile 2, will have the next 10 highest values, right? So that is how it will get created. I'm ranking them by 1 to 10. Imagine there's a class of 100 students who got different marks in physics. Can you create 10 groups based on their ranks?
Right.
That's all I'm doing. Nothing complex. Okay, so now when we do this, across these ranks, I want to see what is the total number of observations, first of all. And I also want to see the average event rate, So when I say that group by P rank tree, D tree, and I have this particular feature target, and across these, the target value, I apply the aggregate function of count and mean. When I apply mean on target, by now you guys know that the mean function on the target value will give me the actual probabilities, right? So we know that just by, we are going to get these things. This is the outcome. P rank D tree, count, actual event rate. Okay. Okay. And also I want to see the predicted event rate. So I bring in the ypred P, aggregated as mean. Now I'm renaming a few columns. So I'm renaming this data frame RF rank actuals. In this, I'm renaming this column to actual event rate. Actually, this is a spelling mistake I've made here. Please correct this in your own codes. And I have changed the mean column in the predicted data frame, rank DF predicted, to predicted event rate. And then finally join them together. So once I join them, I end up getting these three columns. See, P rank D tree, count, actual event rate, and predicted event rate. Can all of you see this? 1, 2, 3, and 4 columns. By now, I have these 4 columns in the process.
Yes.
Till this point. Now, the data is not yet sorted. So I want to sort it. I want to actually sort it by my decile values. So what I do is I will sort it by ascending order, because I'm sorry, by descending order, because the decile equal to 10 will actually be composed of the highest probability values. The decile equal to 1 will be composed of the lowest probability values. Why? Because that is how the quartile cut function actually works with method equal to first. Okay, so I'm sorting it by the decile values, and then I'm creating a bunch of columns. So I'm first of all creating number of events. How will I create number of events? I have the count, or these are my total number of observations, right? Total number of customers multiplied by the rate of event, the probability of response, right? So if I get probability of response 20% and I have 100 customers, then my number of events is nothing but 20% multiplied by 100. Same thing. So I'm getting number of events here. And next thing I want to know is I want to accumulate them. I want to see that by first is by, in the first decile, how many of them are getting captured. By the time I move to the second decile, on a total basis, A and B, how many events can get captured. So things like that. I'm basically trying to accumulate them. Okay. Now, once you accumulate, you can capture how many events, you can actually calculate how many events are getting captured across all the deciles. This is not the same as probability. So let's come over here. I think till this point, it is all clear, right? Number of events here is nothing but the actual event rate, 31.55% multiplied by 2000 gives you 631 events, 631 responders. 631 responders, when you do when you apply the Q sum function across all these deciles, you will see 631 plus 390 plus 1021 plus 358. So you keep on accumulating it. The last value will be 2512. So we know that the data is composed of 2512 events any which way, right? Right. Okay. Now, what you want to know now is you want to take 631 and you want to divide that by 2512. So that accounts for 25% of all responders, or nothing but event captures. So 25% of all responders are captured in this particular group, which is first decile. Okay. Now, yes, the stronger your model is, the higher will be your event capture rate. Now, similarly, not only event, you can have the non-event also, right? Now, if you see this, actual event rate is this. So what is the non-event rate? Non-event rate is just 100 minus 0.3155, right? So when you take that and you multiply it by count, you will get a non-events. So number of non-events is nothing but, okay, so number of non-events is even simpler. So you have total number of customers, you have these many responders. So number of non-responders are 1369, right? Similarly, I can want to accumulate the non-responders into all these groups. And once I do that, I can then see that in the first group, what percentage of non-responders are captured? 7.8% of non-responders are captured in first group or first decile, as compared to 25% of all responders are being captured in the first group. Now there's a statistic or a metric called KS. KS is a distance measure between two distributions. So if you take the distribution of, if you take this column, cumulative event capture rate, right? Cumulative responder capture rate and cumulative non-event capture, right? These two columns, this column and this column, right? You can take the absolute difference between these two and calculate the KS value. So I've taken the subtraction of event capture minus non-event capture, rounded it off to the 4 decimal places. That is how I'm calculating Kolmogorov-Smirnov statistic. Now, guys, if you want to build a good model, your Kolmogorov-Smirnov statistic must get maximized by the third decile. If your maximum KS value is not achieved by the third decile, then there is a lot of room for improvement in the overall power of the model, discrimination power of the model. Unfortunately, that is the case with the decision tree outcome here. So we can see that, it's really not. And this is an illustrative graph just to see if I'm getting a steady rank ordering of actual event rate. So what are some of the things we are looking for from this output here? We are looking for, first of all, a steady rank ordering. If the first decile is distinctly highest, second decile is highest than the other, but lower than the first. So a steadily decreasing curve with respect to actual event rate. That is number one. Number two, by the third decile, how much is the cumulative event capture? That is the second point that we're looking for. Okay. That is the second point that we are looking for. Okay. Third thing is that by which decile does my KS value get maximized, and also what is the value? So largely there are three things that you must consider, and then only you will be able to figure out here the outcome of the model. So let's quickly move to our output of random forest. So run the random forest outcome and run the GBM outcome. So when you run the random forest outcome, are all of you following me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right.
So, Aritra, I am getting error while plotting the graph.
Don't mind the graph. You can ignore the graph for now.
Okay.
Let's work with the tables. You're not getting any error with the tables, no?
And yeah, no, I am not getting any error on tables.
Okay, so the graph is just for illustration purposes. That's okay. Not a we don't have to look at the graph to decide which model is good, but we need the table. The table you're getting, correct?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's have a look at the random forest curve. Random forest. First of all, am I getting a steady rank ordering? Yes, I am. What is my first decile event rate? Okay, my first decile. So this model, if I use the predicted probabilities from this model and I select the top 10% of those guys, of top 10% people who have scored the highest probability based on the, okay. Yeah. Okay. So the model has been able to find out 2000 odd customers. In that group, 43% of them, 43% of these guys, 43% of 2000 is the chance of success. So you can see that 860 events are identified out of these 2000 odd customers, which is a lot, because we are talking about 12.5% as an average event rate, but this one decile has captured much higher than 12.5%. Can you see that?
Yes.
So see, the problem is this. The problem with 50% cutoff and confusion matrix is this, that although, see, this is a great outcome, right? But you see the average predicted event rate or predicted probability, they are nowhere close to 50. So even at the best decile, the random forest model is not giving you a 50% predicted probability. But whatever it is giving you, whatever predicted probability is giving you, it is enough for you to identify a decile which is going to give you 43% chance of success. Okay?
Yeah.
Makes sense? Okay.
Yes.
Everybody, so are you able to follow the storyline here? Okay. Now, what is the KS value here? It will improve. It will improve. See, it has now come to maximum value is at the third decile. Third decile, because marginally third and fourth, there are not a lot of difference. So only marginal improvement. So let's see how the GBM outcome looks. Can one of you run the GBM outcome? Yeah, all of you getting the GBM outcome as the best?
Yes, almost 78%.
Sorry?
78% probability for the first decile.
78% probability. Okay. Now see, even in the GBM, the highest predicted event rate is just 4.497, which is why the confusion matrix does not look good. The recall score does not look good. You guys are able to, can you now relate to what I was trying to tell you earlier?
Yeah. Yes.
See, that is just one way. The rock curve is just one way. Nobody will actually use the default threshold. So you can see this. Okay, awesome. Now let's see the third decile capture. Third decile capture is 87.8% responders by the third decile. So this is a hugely strategic as a model. Why? because I can literally ask them to target only these 6,000 odd customers. Because if you can, go after these 6,000 odd customers, you will have 2,200 responses as opposed to having 2,500 responses by going after 20,000 odd customers. So you save 70% of the marketing cost by not going after the bottom 7 deciles, but at the same time, you maximize your ROI and improve your profitability by having 87 or 88% all responders captured in that small group. It is like saying that I want to make investments. Marketing offers are nothing but investments, but these investments are very strategically made. Earlier they had to make 20,000 investments. Now they're going to make only 6,000 investments, out of which there's going to be substantial amount of success. Can you follow my argument here?
Yes.
Sorry, what was that? Any questions? Okay. So if everybody is able to get the GBM outcome, tell me if you're not able to get the outcome. Saurav, Kajal?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Getting it?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what is the KS value that you're getting?
66. The third decile, right?
KS value, right?
0.574 for the first one.
That is Kajal, correct? Saurav. Okay. Saurav's getting 0.57.
I'm getting around 66%.
I'm getting.
Similar to what you
I
have.
got 69.5 in the second decile.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. So if your KS is maximized in the second decile, guys, then the model is actually very, very strong. Okay. You are.
I'm getting 61 in the second.
Second decile. That is the maximum value?
Right. Yes, that's it. That's the maximum.
Great model. Awesome. I'm very happy. Everybody. Now, see, we have 10 more minutes. But by now, do you guys have a sense of going through this project in a hands-on manner? You've gone through the pain yourselves, right? So that's why we should have more hands-on classes. Okay, so are we all in agreement that the GBM model is what we like the most?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's see, how do we articulate? I mean, obviously we will articulate our model. Somebody says, okay, why do you like this the most? We'll articulate using these tables and the confusion matrix also. But mostly this table gives you a stronger story. But if you have to create a recommendation, then what will you do? So I have just taken a very simplistic approach. I've taken a metric which is going to define customer value for the bank and that metric is average monthly balance. Okay, so I've taken that, and I've taken a marketability metric called SCR, marketability score. Now what I want to do is I want to create low, medium, high kind of buckets for both balance and score. Okay, now I want to take these low, medium, high groups and I want to make a pivot table with the top deciles and the bottom deciles, and then see that what kind of values make sense. Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, now but before I do this, let me scroll up to show you, remind you rather, one more thing. See, in the bivariate analysis that you did like a few minutes back, you will see, yeah, this graph. What do you see? If balance increases, chance of responses go down, correct?
Right.
Yes.
So this tells you that anybody with a high balance you cannot target, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Isn't that the conclusion? That is the conclusion, right?
Yes.
But you know,
Right, the response will be less from
right. But
that part.
but the problem is this, guys. Guys, this is the problem. For the bank, high value customers are the ones which have high balance. If I have only 100 rupees in the bank, will the bank give me will the bank feel comfortable giving me a 2 lakh rupee loan as compared to somebody who has say 5 lakhs as deposit in the bank? And I mean, that person will, the bank will feel more comfortable giving that person a loan, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Correct.
But then the chance of responses are much lower. So then it is an issue, correct? Can you
Right.
see? Yeah. See how your model will actually solve for this issue. Let's go down. Now let's go down. Everybody now reminded of this problem. Now let's go down. Okay. Yeah. Let's take the balance variable and let's take the SCR variable. Use our, dear friend quartile cut function to create deciles. Okay. And let's give them simplistic names like balance rank and SCR rank. This should be very simple. Let's go ahead and run this. 1 minute. I have 1 second. I need to run this myself. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Now, if I want to do a check on what kind of numbers are getting captured across all these deciles, and I can just do a, I can check for minimum. If required, I can check for maximum. I can use AGG function to even do other things also. Like over here, I can do this. Yeah. Yeah, you can just check and see. These are the boundaries. And balance rank 1, meaning 0 balance to 1925, 9258. Balance rank 2 is between this and this. So these are the boundaries that are getting created. Okay, balance ranks. Similarly, score ranks. That okay, 100 to 157, 157 to 205, 205 to 253, and so on and so forth. This is just to give me a sense that if somebody questions you later on that, okay, when you say high balance, what do you mean? Low balance, what do you mean? So you can actually come up with the cutoffs. Cool?
Right. Yes.
Okay. See, I just want to show you, if you were interested, actually, you can just copy this. Sorry, P rank EVM and predicted. 1 second. You can calculate, you can check. So if if you want to target the top 3 deciles, then 10, 9, and 8, right? 10, 9, and 8. So you need to keep a cutoff of 12.25 was your, what do you call it? The average event rate, right?
Yes.
So you can keep a cutoff of 12% and should be okay. I mean, you can maximum create a lot of these, what do you call it? You could create custom cutoffs like this of probability cutoffs. Okay, sorry for digressing. Let's come back. We did the scoring rank and the balance ranks are done. Now what I want to do is I want to keep 2, 1 as low balance. Anything lower than this number, let's call it low balance, and 8 and above as high balance, and the rest of them as mid balance. So let's create that. So 10,000 odd customers in mid balance, high balance 6,000, and then bottom is low balance is 4,000. Okay, fine. Similarly, I do for scoring, and this is arbitrary. You can keep on changing the definition of high, low, etc. Okay, now comes the top 2 and bottom 8. So I know that my KS value got maximized in the second decile. It means that the model is the maximum discrimination power of the model is achieved already by the second decile. Cumulative event capture is 80% by the second decile. So I can decide to only target the top two. The lower I have to target is actually better for my marketing profitability because I have to target lesser number of people. So I'm creating top two and bottom 8. Now, if you want to do a, let's check whether this makes sense. Okay. Now here's the interesting part. We know that in the balance segment, right, the high balance segment, in general, the chance of response is low. I mean, it is on an average not higher than 12.5%. But within the balance segment high, if you target the customers who fall into balance segment high and top two, then you're good.
Yes.
So the model has actually been able to find out a group of customers within high balance segment in which there is 5 times more chance of success. That is the story. That is how you will articulate in your interviews. The outcome of your model is that you've been able to find out a high value segment of customers in which the chance of success is 5 times more than the average. You see the story, guys?
Yes.
This is the story. Now comes that, okay, now in order to give this a more strategic, a feeling of a good framework, we must also look at the relationship with score. So when we do this, the same activity with the score rank segment, so we can see that, okay, within score rank segment also top two is where your focus will lie. So you can skip these two. This is just the count, right? I'm just trying to see how many customers they didn't capture. The interesting part is the last pivot table, where I keep the score rank segment high, medium, low, and I keep balance segment high, low, medium, and then in top two, and I top to bottom 8. So if I do this, I'll be able to figure out, and I can actually copy and paste this, and instead of mean, I can just have count here as well, so that I get both perspectives. Okay. And this is my mean. So top two throughout makes sense. Absolutely. You want to make sure you want to go after the highest value segment. So go after the segment, which is, you can say that, okay, priority should be that marketability should be high and balance should be high. So these 251 customers as top priority. Okay. Marketability mid, balance high. How many customers are there? 268. Third priority, go after 117 customers. High balance, but low marketing, no marketability, very lower, right? So that is how you can create a prioritization. Second level of prioritization should be that, okay, go after everybody with mid balance, high value. So you can say that, okay, kind of go after people who are 100% of high should be targeted, 100%, 70%, 50%, let's say that. So 251, go after everyone. 70% of 900, go after 560 of these guys, randomly pick. 70% of 353, you can go. 50% of low, you can go. So 100, 70, 50, some strategy that you can build. But yeah, that brings me to the end of the conversation about cross-sell strategy for personal loans. We are right on time. And we've not only built a model, but we've been able to create a storyline based on the model performance. I would pause here to see if you have any final questions before we close for today. And if there are any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I also have a small channel on YouTube. Somewhere I haven't been able to keep up with my personal life challenges, jobs, etc. I mean, I haven't really been able to update the videos too much, but yeah, I do intend to do it at some point this year. So if you're interested, I can share the link with some of you. I mean, if you want to follow, that is up to you. But yeah, Any questions? Anything that we should talk about right away?
No, just I want us to please share the link.
The link is here. But any questions on the class right now? Anything that you want to talk about? No?
Hi, welcome.
Sharing in the chat group. Okay, so great. I shared the link with some of you. You can just check.
So after doing all this analysis, how do you present it in the form of a PPT, or what all do you have a sample?
Yeah. So, okay, I'll show you 1 minute. 1 minute. This is my, I was building content for my channel here. So live project, I just have one live project here, which I've done on predicting the success of telemarketing campaigns. This is how I would like to, I just want to show you, this is, yeah. So it's important to outline a overall plan, okay? That this is how you will approach. You would do this exploratory analysis, bivariate plots, what kind of insights you want to talk about, what kind of insights you want to generate from bivariate plots, what kind of algorithms you want to test out. Then comes your concept of precision recall, etc. How do you evaluate it from a model performance point of view? Then comes gains chart, which we saw right in the Lorentz curve. Then comes analytics to recommendation. So I created a basic recommendation here that if you want to go after the top, the high likelihood versus low likelihood, 70% can be as test, 30% can be control. And in case of low likelihood, you can just keep 30% as test and the rest of them as control, because you don't want to end up targeting a lot of people who don't have a great chance of responding. So that's how you can, this is just one simple way to, bring your insights together in a story format. But yeah, there are many ways of articulating it. But if you look at your notebook itself gives you so many talking points. You have the graphs on one hand, you have exact outcomes, you have the, you've got these, the pivot tables. You can actually, so for example, you can show the graph on the balance, and then you can come back and show this particular cross tabulation, right? Where you can show that, look, on an overall basis, high balance, I would not be able to identify people within the high balance segment if I don't use this model. You see what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying, guys? Your model is actually helping you cherry pick customers. Yeah, that's what, that is how you can articulate this. Discriminate people who are likely to respond, not likely to respond, and create a audience for cross sell. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions at this stage, I would like to take your leave. And I hope that, this session has been useful to some extent. If you have any questions, anything at all related to maybe the classes that you've had on different algorithms, things that we have outside of this project also, you want to talk about anything connected to data science, machine learning, please feel free to call me. Is that understood?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon today, and then have the rest of the day, have a nice rest of the day and a great upcoming week. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.